the Astros will not have Justin Verlander in 2023, which if you've been listening to my radio show, The Paul Gallant Show, you might have heard me mention a couple of times as a possibility. Once Jacob deGrom signed with the Texas Rangers, I figured, okay, well, they don't get deGrom back. They're probably going to go after Verlander, seeing as they weren't scared to give Max Scherzer a ton of money. They gave him a 2-year deal worth $86 million with a vesting option for a third season. So Verlander, who pitched with the Astros from 2017 on, he won the American League Championship Series in 2017, MVP. I think he won the Cy Young with the Astros in 2018. He also wins the Cy Young this past season with his statistical best season ever. He leaves. And it has me wondering about how you generally treat a star that leaves your favorite team. How do you handle it? I think we should set some rules here. It's been interesting to see the reaction to Justin Verlander over the last couple of weeks because there's been a lot of people who are of the belief that Verlander was just going to walk in free agency. Because think about it, the Astros have a ton of starting pitching. They have Framber Valdez, who was a Cy Young Award finalist. They have Christian Javier, who from the second half of the season on might have had the most filthy stuff in baseball and had incredible statistics when it came to strikeouts this past season. You have Lance McCullers and his filthy stuff as your third starter. Maybe not the most consistent guy, but definitely somebody that's, I think, a challenge when he is on his best game. You have Jose Urquidy and Luis Garcia in your 4 and 5 spots. Those guys are pretty damn good. And then you have young Hunter Brown, who came up at the end of last season, pitches an awful lot like Justin Verlander as a potential 6th starter, bullpen arm too for long relief. You have a ton of pitching depth. Moving on from Verlander is something that I think a lot of you guys are okay doing, especially considering what the Astros have moved on from over the last couple of years. It hasn't hurt them. George Springer goes to Toronto. They were fine. Garrett Cole goes to New York. They were fine. Zach Greinke leaves. They were fine. Carlos Correa leaves. They were fine. Verlander is the latest. So it's hard to be upset at Justin Verlander. That said, there are some people out there who I feel like have been dicks when it comes to the way that they talk about Verlander. I get that people generally remember the last thing that you've seen, but are we really going to say that Verlander doesn't belong here, good riddance, because he sucked in the World Series? Or he's been surprisingly different from what he is in the regular season, in the postseason, pretty much his entire career. You shouldn't think that way. And yet there's a lot of people out there who do. And I don't want to come across as someone creating a straw man that I can just beat the hell out of. But there's enough people out there that actually make this straw-sounding man into a real boogeyman. And I feel like they're making everyone look bad in town. If a player was good for you and doesn't leave you for a rival team, you got to be nice. And I think there was an expectation that maybe Verlander would sign with the New York Yankees or that he could potentially sign with the Los Angeles Dodgers, and had that happened, okay, maybe it's a slightly different story, but the guy won 2 World Series with you. Sure, maybe he didn't deliver the postseason performances that you expected, but this is a guy who won you the 2017 American League Championship Series. You don't win that without him, and if you don't win that series, who knows how the last 6 years go. Would the Yankees have been the team that's confident and has the Astros number going forward? I don't know. I mean, you got to wonder. Verlander legitimized the Astros. I've said before that I think he's the most important pitcher in Astros history. Some people have argued Nolan Ryan. Guy's never won a Cy Young Award, never won a World Series. Definitely a guy that you love, but also a part of 5 different teams over the course of his career. I can't give it to Nolan Ryan. And there are other guys that maybe you could make the argument for, but Verlander helped you win your first 2 World Series titles, and he deserves a parade and a toast and all of the flowers that you could possibly throw his way on his way to the New York Mets. He deserves all of the love on his way out the door. On the comments section, youtube.com/Paul Gallant, Elizio Garcia says, win. Yeah, it's a win for Verlander. He's getting paid again after winning the Cy Young Award. He should have gotten paid. But the Astros, who have about $41 million in money to spend before they would cross over a luxury tax threshold and have to pay additional penalties, this was the right move to make. You still have some money to play with to sign an outfielder or to sign Wilson Contreras or something like that. That's a good spot to be in, especially considering the pitching depth that you have. I agree with you, Elizio. Now, what are the exceptions for not being nice to an athlete on his way out the door? There are definitely some. Growing up in Boston, I was pissed when the Patriots didn't re-sign Super Bowl 36, Super Bowl 38 hero Adam Vinatieri, who at that moment in time was the most clutch kicker in NFL history. Vinatieri signed with the Indianapolis Colts, and it did feel like a bit of betrayal, even though we're talking about a kicker who got paid and was rather adequately replaced by Stephen Gostkowski after the fact. You also, if you were in Boston in the early 2000s, have Johnny Damon. Johnny Damon helps win a World Series with the Red Sox in 2004, 2005. He is still on the team. I think it was 2006 where he signed with the New York Yankees, and he was treated as if he was Judas. I think that people were dropping bags of money into center field upon his return to the Yankees because he went to the arch rival. That's where you could say, fuck off. Are you justified in saying it? Probably not. And I would say, especially in the case of Justin Verlander, had he signed with the Yankees, had he signed with the Dodgers, you should have tipped your hat to him. This wasn't like Garrett Cole wearing a Scott Boras hat on his way out after not winning anything with you, you know? So we got to set some rules here. Say your star player, I don't know, shows up to the start of the season out of shape and doesn't seem to be very engaged, considering he had said organization do all of his bidding for pretty much a decade. I'm talking about James Harden here. In that situation, that person should be booed upon his return, especially if he quits until he eventually forces his way out of town. And remember, the Brooklyn Nets made that trade to get James Harden. And they traded a lot to get him now in retrospect, but he's only there with the Nets for a couple of years. He quits on them again, and then he moves on to the Philadelphia 76ers. I remembered when Harden forced his way out of town in Houston. Nationally, there wasn't much backlash to him quitting on the Rockets. I thought it was a joke. I thought it was bullshit. There was a lot of understanding for him leaving the team. And yeah, the Rockets have sucked since Harden left, and maybe they had gotten to a point where they could only suck going forward. But the way that Harden left was such a fuck you to everybody in Houston that I think still that you should have zero positive thoughts towards that guy. Because unlike with Justin Verlander, who won the equivalent of Harden's MVP with the Cy Young Award, Verlander had one postseason moment. It was the 2017 ALCS. If you're thinking of the great moments from James Harden in Houston sports history, you're going to be hard-pressed to legitimately think of one outside of, well, he won MVP. Because how many playoff bad moments can you think of off the top of your head? Like the time he was on the bench during that comeback victory against the Clippers, game 6, I think it was 2015. You have him getting swatted by Manu Ginobili at the end of a game against the Spurs, a bunch of horrible stat lines along the way, being a part of that team that missed 27 straight threes against the Golden State Warriors in game 7 of the 2018 series, not being able to take advantage of an injured Kevin Durant in a Rockets-Warriors series a couple of years later. Like, it goes on and on and on and on about things that with Harden you should be disappointed about. Harden should be dead to you. If the guy quits on you, doesn't matter if you've had good memories along the way, you shouldn't root for him. Russell Wilson, same situation. Yeah, he won a Super Bowl with the Seahawks, but he was more along for the ride. That defense won that Super Bowl with the 43-8 Super Bowl victory that they had over the Denver Broncos. If you quit your way out of town or passive-aggressively whine your way out of town like Russell Wilson did, yeah, fuck that guy on the way out. And I suppose that's an irrational way to go about things because sometimes the team in question is an absolute dumpster fire. I'm talking about the Broncos. Or maybe the team in question did some things that you could actually understand why the star in question might be frustrated. And to an extent, you could see that with the Seattle Seahawks and Russell Wilson. But now that everything's played out the way that it has, it's hard to look at it from that same perspective. And then, of course, you have the guy who quits on his team, quits on his teammates, tries to force his way out of town, gets involved in a scandal where he commits sexual misconduct with woman after woman after woman after woman. And that's what you have with Deshaun Watson. I am shocked that there was anybody outside NRG Stadium going into this game in support of Deshaun Watson. I saw Landry Locker tweeted out a picture of two absolute nerds who were standing out about and holding two just shittily designed signs. One said Watson for president. The other one said they lied. It wasn't original. The art looked like shit. I suppose now there's a viral photo of those two that's going around. You can check it out on Landry Locker's Twitter feed. Shout out to Landry Locker who had me on the into the locker room, which is his little YouTube show. I say little, that sounds passive aggressive. His YouTube show that he does after every single Texans game talked about my experience in the press conference room. But Deshaun Watson, no one should like the guy, despite him being probably the best quarterback in Texans history. You could make an argument for Matt Schaub, I guess, and probably in recent Houston history, just the best quarterback at all. We have to set some rules here. But if the guy's won 2 titles for you, you gotta be nice, be kind to him out the door. And there's too many people when it comes to Justin Verlander that are essentially saying things along the lines of, yeah, well, he sucked in the playoffs. Good riddance. No, too much of that.